Hello everybody, welcome back from Top of the Wall. My name is Mason, your favorite Mason, don't you forget it. And today I'm being a little Frankie. We are going to be playing this fun deck that I made. It's a mix of like Boggles mixed with Kuldotha Boros, and it involves doing similar things to Kuldotha Boros, like with its draw engine, but also having the option for more utility with different effects that you can get when enchantments leave or enter the battlefield. While at the same time there's also the fun part of Boggles, where when you get all the enchantments out and there's the payoffs like Ancestral Mask, and putting those things together in one deck and being able to just ram your opponent in the face for like 15, 16 in the air. Sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's fun to just vindicate pretty much every single turn. Now, let's get into the deck tech. I'll show you what I mean. The enchantments that are going to be fueling this draw engine of ours are 4 Abundant Growths and 3 Urban Utopias and 3 Vessel of Nascency? Yes, Nascency, I believe that's the right one. Now, these enchantments all give us some form of card to draw. Abundant Growth gives us the ability to draw a card when it enters the battlefield, and it's our preferred one if we get to choose which one that we have. Then Urban Utopia, and finally Vessel of Nascency. It is cheap, and when we bounce back to our hand, we're just basically playing 1 extra mana to replay it, and later in the game it can stock our graveyard, get us a little bit of card selection as it digs into our library for us. Now the creatures that we're playing to bounce all of these enchantments back to our hands and repeatedly draw us cards are, we're starting with 4 Drake Familiar, 4 Dreamstalkers, and 3 Floodbringer Serpents. Now the Drake Familiar specifically says return an enchantment you control to your hand when it enters the battlefield or sacrifice it. This is one of our evasive creatures that we can help use to have a payoff for returning these enchantments to our hand and playing the game like this. Well, Dreamstalker is more meant to help us stabilize against any kind of aggressive deck and immediately have a presence on the board and a good strong defending creature. Later, a beater if we decide to enchant it. And Floodbringer Serpent, this one consistently returns enchantments to our hand. It's more of a later in the game card that helps us continuously draw and continuously get the option to choose which enchantment to return to our hand, if any, that we want. And it is a 4/4 for 5/5, not a great body, but what we're looking for is its recurring attacking trigger to return the enchantment to our hand. Now for our payoffs for having all of these enchantments: 4 Ancestral Mask and 3 Orognarls. These are big, heavy hitting permanents that when they enter the battlefield, they don't have any ability, but they immediately have a presence and can start dealing a massive amount of damage to our opponent throughout the game. Although Orognarl doesn't get as large as Ancestral Mask, being only able to get +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield, it does have an evasion that prevents creatures that are smaller from it from chump blocking and saving their controller some damage. Now for our utility enchantments in the deck, we have 2 Eel Umbra, we have 1 Sentin's Desire, and 4 Reality Acids. Now the Eel Umbra has Totem Armor and Flash and gives the enchanted creature +1/+1, and we're mainly using it as sort of a pseudo counter spell against any kind of removal. While Sentin's Desire, I'm gonna go with it, is a payoff for any kind of graveyard synergy that Vessel of Nascency gives us, and it can force all of their creatures to block one of our creatures that has been buffed up. So we can almost create this mini board wipe where we trade maybe even just one of our creatures, or perhaps the creature's too large for theirs, and force them to block, choose which creatures we want to die, and trade off. While Reality Acid is a utility removal spell that can enchant any permanent, and then when we return it to our hand, the Leave the Battlefield trigger goes off and causes the permanent's controller to sacrifice it. So when we have a Floodtide Serpent or a Drake Familiar or a Dreamstalker enter the battlefield and return this to the hand, it was just 3 mana for Vindicate. And we can pay 3 mana again to return it to the battlefield. We can just continuously hit a land every single turn on an opponent that may be at parity with us or may have fewer creatures than us so they're afraid to attack in, and slowly start to strip mine them out of the game. The last two creatures in the deck, Helios Pilgrim and Oromancer, are just some creatures that give us a little bit of card advantage and do us a few little synergies with auras, some of our enchantments that we might want. Helios Pilgrim tutors for an aura, while Oromancer can return an enchantment from our graveyard to our hand, gives us that synergy with Vessel of Nescency, and it's just good in the late game, but we don't want too many of it, because having too many too soon is basically just dead card draw, or a 2/2 for 3, which isn't very good. Now, Helios Pilgrim, on the other hand, is this almost toolboxy kind of card for its ability to tutor out an aura of our choice. So we can get a Santon's Desire when the time is appropriate. That's why we only have one in the deck, and another one of these. Having too many of that desire isn't very good, and a lot of times the ability isn't worth having if we don't have Threshold or we don't exactly have the right board state to play this out. But we always could use a 5th copy of Reality Acid. Then we have 2 Moments of Peace. They're good if we mill them over with Vessel of Nescency. They're alright against any kind of creature-based attack strategy, which is the primary win condition in Pauper. So decided to throw them in the deck. Now for our lands, we have 11 forests, 6 islands, and 4 Thornwood Falls. A pretty basic mana base, but I felt that it was important to have the ability to have untapped lands very frequently. And flooding out with this deck isn't necessarily a big risk or a big problem. We don't mind going up to 8 lands sometimes. Now for our sideboard, you're going to notice that the sideboard is a little colorful, and that's because of our ability to fix our mana so quickly, and we're already in 2 colors anyway. So a lot of these cards can just fit right in, only costing 1 mana that's off color. And it's how we're able to swing Helios Pilgrim and Oromancer to begin with. We're going to start with 2 Calming Verse. It's a sorcery for 4 mana, and it destroys all the enchantments our opponents control. However, it will destroy all of the enchantments that we control if we control an untapped land. Fortunately, we can just go ahead, tap our lands, and we'll be totally fine. And 2 Cartouche of Ambition. It is an aura that gives one of our creatures +1/+1 in lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, it gives target creature -1, a -1 counter. We got 2 Electrickery, good against elves and a lot of token decks. 3 Hydroblast, just a needed card against any kind of red deck. 1 Moment's Peace to help fight against aggro, because sometimes when 2 Moments of Peace aren't quite enough and our opponent really is that aggro and they're planning on a real swarm against us, 3 Pyroblast to help fight off counter spells and to help really stick it to Delver. Gotta stick it to Delver. 1 Reaping the Graves. This deck was in Kuldotha Boros for a moment, and I feel that we can actually swing this card, having our mana base the way it is, being able to fix our mana even more effectively than Kuldotha Boros, even though they weren't playing very many black sources at the time. And it has Storm, so when we play a Drake Familiar to return, let's say, an Urban Utopia to our hand, replay the Urban Utopia, and then have enough mana left over for Reaping the Graves to just return a few creatures that may have died earlier in the game to our hand. It's not a lot to ask, and Rafello's Gift is similar in that sense. When we return our green enchantments to our hand and being able to reveal them to get the maximum effect out of the ability, the spell. Both Rafello's Gift and Reaping the Graves help against a lot of late game decks. This deck was an interesting deck that I had a lot of fun making, and came from an idea of this one budget deck that I had made back in Theros with some similar cards to start, and seeing Kuldotha Boros reminded me of it, so I decided why not try to make this thing in Pauper. And luckily for me, there were a few creatures that I had to choose from that were capable of returning these enchantments to my hand. So thankfully, I was able to take one of my favorite decks from a long time ago, from years ago, and update it, put in a few new cards, and actually make a lot of new upgrades for the deck. And I think this one is better than the original budget one that I had made for outside of Pauper. It was just this fun little casual deck that I had made. Now, if you would like to play a version of this deck, as I always mention in the Tapped Out website under the description area, just go ahead and check the maybe board. Check down in there. There's always a few extra tools and things that I have lying around down in there, different cards to choose from, things that I was considering but just chose against, and some different ways to branch out with the deck, some different options, and if you want to rebalance the deck, fine tune it to make it more graveyard synergistic, then there are some tools down there. If you want to play potentially counter spells in the deck, there are some down there. And if you need any advice on it, or what I was thinking about when I was building the deck, leave a comment below, try to message me. You can always message me directly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram I believe has Messenger, tappedout.net. I think even YouTube now has messages. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Come on in for that face touch.
You know what? Thank you to my new subscriber. I have it written back here on the wall. Frunculozino. I butchered that. Still cooler than my name though.